Hello everybody and welcome to the very first episode of car reviews here on Glass Fuses. Today we've got the 2022 Lexus NX450h. It's a plug-in hybrid. It's based on the RAV4. It's about $60,000 and it's actually quite good. We're going to go over some details, go out for a drive, and see what it's all about. So I got with me here the printout of the window sticker, and it's got some interesting options that bring it up to a total of $61,840. Options include advanced park, which is the parking assist that helps you back into a parking spot, a digital inner mirror, which is actually kind of cool, triple beam headlamps with washers and cornering lamps, the 6.6 kilowatt onboard charger, which is available for quick charging and charging the battery as you go. Premium paint, which is cadmium orange. It's actually quite an interesting color. I don't know if I particularly like it. It's a great color, I just don't know if it's for this car. You have a panoramic view monitor with lane change assist. That's basically the bird's eye view camera, which actually shows more than just the bird's eye view. I'm going to overlay some video now of me reversing from this spot. You can see that it actually goes and overlays video from when you're backing up, and it makes your car entirely transparent, which is really cool. Smartphone convenience package that will charge your phone in the little charging pad right here in the center console. Carpet cargo mat, illuminated cargo sill, mudguards, and rear puddle lamp and side puddle lamp. So quite a few options on there, but nothing really extremely pricey. I mean, the biggest pricing option here is the lane change assist with the 360 camera, which makes it relatively base model, but you still get a lot for the money, especially when you consider that it is pretty much a $62,000 car. Compared to the RAV4, which is around $50,000 for their plug-in hybrid, this one justifies its cost a lot more effectively because you get into the car and you can see just how high quality of stuff is. Not that the RAV4 is low quality, but it's a step above in this car for sure. Styling wise, on the outside, we know of the cadmium orange paint, which is a very heavy metal metallic flake, but the outside is actually, it's a really good design. I quite like it. All the individual elements, I don't know if I would really say that I like, but when you put them all together, they actually work quite well. You've got Lexus's typically enormous big front grille. Then you have these lower side strakes that go down below it. Now these are actually kind of interesting. So you've got fog lights, and then you've got these little lower lights here that will actually turn on and assist when going into a corner. I'll overlay that video of that happening right here. You've got obviously the headlight washers that we talked about and the upgraded headlights that are here. And there's not a lot of body cladding, which you typically see on the crossovers. You got the typical stuff that's around the wheel arches, but nothing really extreme. Out back, you've got more of the Lexus usual styling, those typical Lexus style taillights. You've got the kick plate for doing the little opening of the back tailgate, which is always convenient when you've got stuff to load in and out here. And a good note here is that even though it does have the larger battery pack compared to the regular NX hybrid, the 350h, you don't really suffer too much for room here in the back cargo area. I had a number of boxes that I had to load a couple days ago, and it passed that test with no problem at all. I actually thought that it did better than I expected. You get a little cargo divider up here, and the seats obviously fold flat, so you do not suffer one bit for having a big old battery pack here with the other motor. So the motor itself actually is quite interesting. Up front, you have the 2.5 liter engine with an electric motor assist that will help the front wheels. But then you don't actually have a drive shaft to the rear wheels. This has its own standing electric power for the rear that kicks in with all-wheel drive. So that's kind of neat how they have that configured where you don't actually have any connection between the front and the rear wheels. You don't really feel it as you're driving, and I haven't really tested this properly off-road. This is actually the most off-road that it's gone just here in this gravel park. But so far, I can say that I like it. It's a neat vehicle, and I think we should take a look under the hood real quick because there's something very interesting in there that I need to point out. All right, so here we have the business side of things. We've got the 2.5 liter 4-cylinder engine from Toyota that makes about 180 to 185 horsepower, coupled with the electric motor over here. Again, this powers just the front axle. The rear axle has its own powertrain, and this combination between the two motors and the gas motor makes 305 horsepower, which is actually quite stout for a RAV4, and I think it's kind of fitting for the Lexus NX450h. But one thing that's really interesting that I said that I wanted to point out here is this. It's probably the most unusual oil weight that I've ever seen on a car ever. Now, apparently, talking with some friends in the industry, they say that that is for lower amount of friction as the engine is turning. That makes the engine run in a more efficient way. It's kind of interesting why they would pick 0W16 instead of 0W15. I always thought that that jumped in numbers of 5. But apparently that's a real thing, and it's been on Toyotas for a long while. It just kind of caught me off guard. But I thought it was kind of interesting to point out. If you ever have any knowledge about oil and you want to leave a message in the comments for me on why not just go to 0W15 versus 0W16, definitely make sure to let me know, because that's one thing that I would not have expected. So now that we've taken a look in here, I think we should pop inside and take a look at the interior. So one of the first things that you're going to notice with this car is that it doesn't have like a traditional door handle per se. It's got these weird handles that have just a small little pad on the inside that when you pull them, that's all you need to open the door. The door handle itself doesn't actually move, and then this obviously locks the car after you've left. It's telling me that I can't lock the car because I've got the key in my pocket, but then you are greeted with Lexus's usual interior. Now, on the inside, you are greeted with the usual Lexus high-quality interior, but you have this very vast glossy panel that has an integrated electronic display. There's no actual gauges. There's no analog gauges. Everything is displayed right up here in a high-def screen. You have a heads-up display right up there that you can see, and then you have this big, wide screen for all of your infotainment. It is a solid 13 inches across. It's a massive screen, even though it might not look it in the pictures here. You've got the wireless charging for your phone here, and you have your different driving modes down here. So you've got a trail button, you've got your traction control off, you've got the ability of changing between driving the car as a hybrid or actually having the car charge the battery while you drive, and then this one just switches it between auto, EV, or hybrid vehicle. So you'll actually notice that this is the same shifter that you'll find in a Prius. You use it in the same way. I guess because it's an electric car, fine. That's cool. We can work with that. Other buttons that you have here are going to be the park assist that we mentioned earlier and the 360-degree view camera. Let's take a look at that right now. Okay, so you can see when you first turn on the camera that it will show what it looks like from above. Those are the typical cameras that you have in the nose and the side mirrors and in the back. But then when you actually put the car in a drive and start moving, it will take the images as it's going and it will turn the car transparent. So see, as you're driving, it'll take the memory of what you've just driven over, and you'll actually be able to see exactly what you're above. It's kind of cool. I didn't think that that was, as a feature, would be something that I would admire so much, but I think that's pretty awesome. But for the actual driving, you've got Eco and Sport here, which will change what you see in the dashboard. If you switch over to Sport, you'll actually get a rev counter. You don't get that in the RAV4, or if you change to Eco, everything will turn nice and blue, or if you do normal, it will just display your normal display. Sport button is interesting because it will apply all 305 horsepower for you. It will deploy them all to all four wheels, and maybe we might be able to give that a little test here coming up. So one other thing to note, I don't know if you can see it down there, it says your EV range is 16 and your hybrid range is 364 miles. In my experience so far, I have experienced about, the EV range is accurate. The gasoline range, it's kind of not. Interestingly, the Lexus NX450h is rated at a lot longer of a range by about 60 to 80 miles. Than the Toyota RAV4, even though they share the same engine, the same transmission, the same electric motors, the same fuel tank, the same battery capacity. All of it's the same between the two. Yeah, they have quite widely different ratings on their mileage. This car is a little bit more slippery, I'm assuming, based on maybe more sleek design, maybe not having roof racks above it, but I just found that to be so bizarre that they would have such a wide difference between the two. They both use the same 0W16 oil as well, and yeah, it's weird that two cars that are almost identical could have such a different rating. But either way, let's take this thing out on the road. So with this car, when you first start off, pretty much just in any drive mode, it's going to be all electric power if it has electric power in its reserves. Right now, I've got 16 miles. I've utilized a little bit with some running around back and forth to this photo location, but you will start out almost always in electric mode. However, when you press and hold that charge button, you can press and hold it, gasoline motor is going to turn on. Now you are charging your electric motor as you are driving. Put yourself in a sport mode, and now you have the ability of engaging all of that horsepower, which I think maybe we might decide to just go ahead and take that for a little test right now. So we're going to get ourselves pointed in a straight line, and let's see what we got for all this horsepower. Ready? Okay, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, 55, 60. All right, so it's not slow. It is not slow by any means. Gosh, those electric motors deploy that horsepower really quickly. And because it's a CVT, you don't really have any lag from the transmission. There's no shifting, so it's just all power all the time, and a lot of torque too. Let's take it out on some public roads and see how it drives in some other locations though. So as I'm driving along and gathering some of my thoughts on this car, one of the things that I actually really like is that it bridges the gap between the people who are kind of on the fence about electric vehicles and the people who are ready for it. I think that this is a really good stopgap in between, because you have the advantage of having an electric vehicle. You take it home, you plug it in, you got 40 miles. There's a lot of people that might not even do that during the day, and honestly, they'd fill up this car with fuel, and the fuel would probably go sour before they have to refuel again because they're using so little of it. You know, if you're just doing little running arounds here and there, plug it into a charger when you get to the grocery store or whatever, then this makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure that there's some math that I could put together on how much you'd save on fuel versus how much this costs from, you know, there was some lane track assist that was helping me there. You know, there's some numbers that you can put together on, yeah, it's $60,000, but if you're driving something right now that's a gas guzzler, of which I'm the type that says, hey, V8 Mercedes, let's go, then there's a certain time frame where this would end up paying for itself. And then you don't have the anxiety, any of the anxiety from all of the range, you know, that the battery gives you, because it switches over to gas and it takes over. I did a trip to Indianapolis with this perfectly fine and nearly almost made it back all on one tank and one recharge. And that's pretty impressive for a car like this, because, well, then you don't really have anything to worry about. You get all the advantages of, well, both worlds. You get really none of the disadvantages either. My only thing would be that if they have the ability of putting a larger battery pack and just getting a little bit more range out of it, that would do a whole lot of good. But there's probably a lot of real estate that's currently being occupied where, you know, okay, maybe you go to a smaller, you know, 10-gallon fuel tank instead of a 14-gallon fuel tank and have a little bit more reserve for your batteries. I don't know. I don't know if that's the answer. One thing that I can say, though, is that the ride in this car is good. I mean, it's quiet, it's comfortable, it doesn't use any trick suspension, it doesn't have any, you know, electromagnetic ferrule fluid or anything like that. It's literally just got springs and shocks that are tuned correctly, and there's a lot to be said about that. And actually, there's a lot that Lexus has right on this car too. I love the way that CarPlay works into it. I like the dash, even though I do kind of wish at some point I had an analog gauge for speed, because they don't offer you one. You only get a digital readout. I like the heads-up display. I like the comfort of the seats. I like the fact that when you turn the car back on, it will leave the heated seat and the heated steering wheel back on, where you don't have to turn it on again. It will just leave it in the setting by which you left it. That's a great thing. But not so much a fan of the cruise control. You got to sift through the buttons on the steering wheel. The buttons on the steering wheel are a whole other issue. they change depending on the screen that you have, and you change the screen by the bottom buttons here, but then these buttons change. But then if you have something like, let's say, cruise control engaged, then you can't change the display on the dashboard. It's a little bit weird. That, and then I don't like the door for the, this is getting into nitpicky territory. I don't like the door where you attach the power to recharge the battery. Audi does it right because it drops down. This one still is an open flap, and if you're parking in between cars, somebody's going to try and walk in there and get by it, and it's probably going to snap off at some point or something. But I'm sure that that's probably going to be resolved on cars that are developed specifically for batteries rather than ones that are adapted from having an internal combustion motor. But overall, I mean, I do like the car. I'm sure that I'll probably lose a few enthusiast points because of it, because I'm saying that I like something that doesn't really set my soul on fire. But I like it from the perspective that it's doing exactly what it was designed to do, and it's doing it extremely well. That's a pretty high mark to achieve, in my opinion. One other thing that I forgot to mention: recharge times. If you're plugging in at home in a typical 110 volt outlet, you are going to be looking at about 12 hours to charge from empty. It does have a 6.6 onboard charger, and you can plug it into some of the quick chargers to drop that pretty significantly. It's not like a lot of the newer electric cars, though, that'll go from 10 to 80% in 20 minutes. It's not quite there. But then again, you don't really have to worry about that because you've got the gas motor to kind of make up for it. So, yeah, it's a good in-between. So with that being said, thank you for joining me on this test today. I think we'll do one more blast to 60 miles per hour. Here we go. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. It is quick, that's for sure. See you next time.